Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Walpert. Chapter 21, New Delhi, 1947. As the new year dawned, practically everyone seemed to know it was time for dramatic change in Great Britain's relationship with India. But what was to be done and how? Jinnah had returned home a sick man, too exhausted to say anything, lacking energy even to meet his working committee before January 29th. I hope that Jinnah does not interpret our statement of December 6th to mean that if he only sits back and does nothing, he will get his Pakistan. Pethick Lawrence wrote Wavell on January 2nd, probably suspecting that his letter would be called to Jinnah's attention. It may also be interpreted to mean a provincial autonomy, which would be far less to his liking. I agree with you that Pakistan is quite unworkable proposition. Again, on January 1st, Attlee appealed to Mountbatten to take up Viceroy's burden, and Mountbatten replied 2 days later, I have thought over very earnestly all that you said. It makes all the difference to me to know that you propose terminating the British Raj on a definite and specified date or earlier, if the Indian parties can agree. I could not have gone out there with confidence if it had not been possible to construe my arrival as a perpetuation at this moment of the vice-regal system. I deeply appreciate your offer to give me every assistance in forming my new staff. I told Sir Stafford how honored and touched I was that he should have offered to come to India with me. But I made it clear to him that I felt the presence of a man of his prestige and experience could not fail to reduce me to a mere figurehead in the eyes of the people he would be negotiating with. I feel it is essential that I should be allowed to fly home as often as I feel it really necessary to do so. Although it would be our intention to observe the protocol necessary to uphold the position of Viceroy and Viceroy, my wife and I would wish to visit Indian leaders and representative British and Indian people in their own homes and unaccompanied by staff, and to make ourselves easier of access than the existing protocol appears to have made possible. Lady Edwina Mountbatten's charm was at least as potent as her husband's, and Nehru's romantic fascination for her was to play a role in the frantic last minute negotiations that often kept at least one of the Mountbattens in touch with Jawaharlal, unaccompanied by staff. The British Director of Central Intelligence, Sir Norman P.A. Smith, informed Wavell that from the British angle, the game so far has been well played. Both Congress and the League have been brought into the central government. The Indian problem has been thereby thrust into its appropriate plane of communalism. An opportunity for orderly evacuation now presents itself. The fullest advantage should be taken of our present breathing space. Secretary of State's control over civil officers should be abrogated at the earliest possible moment. This is only fair to the officers and has the political advantage that a decisive gesture of this kind will help to keep the problem on its correct communal plane. Grave communal disorder must not disturb us into action which would reintroduce anti-British agitation. The former is a natural, if ghastly, process tending in its own way to the solution of the Indian problem. Such neo-Malthusian cynicism was rarely put into written form by any 20th century British officials. A few days before the League's working committee was scheduled to meet in Karachi, Khizr ordered his Punjab police to crack down on the active League National Guards in his province. The Muslim Guards were viewed as a party army on lines familiar in Germany and Italy before the war, and compared to Mosley's black shirts in England by Governor Jenkins in explaining the official ban to Pethick Lawrence. More than 1,000 steel helmets were found in National Guard headquarters at Lahore, and the general commanders of the guard were all arrested. The League responded with direct action protests in the streets, demanding an end to Khizr's coalition government and thus finally bringing the Punjab's Muslim sword arm into violent operation, as Begum Shah Nawaz promised Jinnah in Claridge's. The next day, Khizr withdrew his ban, fearing he could not hope to restore provincial peace otherwise. Too late, League leaders now angrily demanded Khizr's immediate resignation. Mass meetings were attended by huge crowds in Lahore and other Punjab cities. Shaukat Hayat proclaimed that the Muslim League was ready to put out 15 million Muslims to break the law if Khizr's ministry refused to resign. At midnight, Khizr struck again, arresting all the most powerful provincial leaders, including the Nawab of Mamdot, Firoz Khan Noon, and Mia Mumtaz Doltana. Riots erupted in every district of Punjab. On January 31st, the League's working committee resolved against calling the council to reconsider its rejection of the mission's plan, thus removing any residual possibility of the League opting to enter the Constituent Assembly. Nehru saw Wavell the next day and vowed that the Constituent Assembly would carry on, saying he would have to consult his colleagues as to their next move. Though Wavell rightly anticipated that Congress can now hardly fail to demand the dismissal or resignation of the League members of the cabinet. Before that request of February 6th came, however, Attlee wrote Wavell to ask him to resign, notifying him that his successor had been chosen. The British cabinet recognized that the danger of civil war in India could not be ruled out and feared that perhaps it was Mr. Jinnah's intention to bring it about. There was no telling what the consequences of their Muslim League's actions in Punjab might be. It seemed that they were developing the technique of civil disobedience. In the long run, the extent to which the League would be able to cause serious trouble would depend on whether their activities caused the Indian army to disintegrate. In New Delhi, astute observers like V.P. Menon now considered India's partition inevitable. On February 20th, 1947, Prime Minister Attlee informed his peers in the Commons that His Majesty's government desire to hand over their responsibility to authorities established by a constitution approved by all parties in India. But unfortunately, there is at present no clear prospect that such a constitution will emerge. His Majesty's government will wish to make it clear that it is their definite intention to take the necessary steps to effect the transference of power into responsible Indian hands by a date no later than June 1948. It is therefore essential that all parties should sink their differences in order that they may be ready to shoulder the great responsibilities which will come upon them next year. Congress and the League both welcomed the new statement. The British government have at last seen the light and taken a historic decision which will finally end the Indo-British conflict in a manner worthy of civilized nations, wrote the Hindustan Times the next day. The Muslim League and Mr. Jinnah are now face to face with reality. No Indian wishes to deny the Muslim community its rightful place in India. It is not possible to do so now that the third party is quitting. There is no alternative to a mutual settlement. But Dawn did not agree, arguing in its lead article the same day. Mr. Attlee and his colleagues appear to have realized at last what the Muslim League has repeatedly asserted, that the hope of framing an agreed constitution for a united India was an idle dream. All attempts made to that end have failed because they were based on an unreal approach. Wavell met with Nehru and Liaquat on February 21st. Nehru was obviously impressed by the statement and conscious of the responsibility thrown on the Congress, reported the Viceroy. He spoke of the possible partition of the Punjab and Bengal if agreement was not reached. Liaquat was not prepared to react for the League, and Wavell suggested it might be best for him to invite Jinnah to come to Delhi. A week later, Liaquat informed Wavell that Jinnah was a sick man, had gone to Bombay, and would not be in Delhi before the middle of the next month, March. During the last week of February, the Punjab erupted with intensified violence in half a dozen major cities including Lahore and Amritsar, with mobs of young League followers invading courts and private houses and endeavouring to hoist Muslim League flag in place of Union Jack. Several deaths of police as well as civilians and hundreds of injuries shook Khizr's resolve and made him decide to settle with the League by releasing all prisoners, removing the month-long ban on public meetings, and hoping to organize an all-party coalition government which Governor Jenkins viewed as most implorable. The League had also begun direct action in the northwest frontier province. Unruly mobs surrounded and broke most of the windows of the Congress Premier, Dr. Khan Sahib's house in Peshawar, while police stood by and refused to obey orders to open fire. Khizr resigned on March 2nd after consulting with Zafarullah Khan and other friends he trusted in Lahore. He concluded to Governor Jenkins that the Muslim League must be brought up against reality without delay. They, League leaders, had no idea of the strength of Hindus and Sikh feeling against them, and so long as he and his Muslim Unionist colleagues acted as a buffer, they would not change their fantastic and arrogant ideas. The outlook for Mamdouh, Punjabi League leader, was very bleak. If he failed to secure adequate support from the Hindus or Sikhs or both, it would be my duty to go into Section 93, Governor's Raj. This marked the end of Punjabi unity, the political demise of the land of five rivers. Sikh leader Swaran Singh told the governor that his party had no intention of joining a coalition government with the League, since they had no intention of allowing themselves to be treated as serfs under Muslim masters, and felt that they were strong enough to defend themselves. Anti-League meetings spread the following week, and Congress and the Akali Sikhs announced plans for mass rallies for March 11th and proclaimed Anti-Pakistan Day to be held throughout the Punjab. Violence spread and more deaths were reported daily. The India debate was launched in the Commons on March 5th by Cripps, who defended the government's policy and noted how unfortunate it was that, just at the moment when the Muslim League was about to reconsider the situation with a view, possibly, to coming into the Constituent Assembly at Karachi, events in the Punjab boiled up. We can only hope that tolerance and good sense will bring about some settlement. This is just another one of those factors which make it so difficult to predict the course of events in India today. Winston Churchill rose the next day to speak the opposition's mind. He affirmed his continued adherence to the 1942 Cripps offer and accused the present government of having departed in several basic respects from the 1942 formula. He launched a bitter attack on the government of Mr. Nehru, which he called a complete disaster, insisting that it was a cardinal mistake to entrust the government of India to the caste Hindu. Turning to the new Viceroy, Churchill argued, India is to be subjected not merely to partition, but to fragmentation, and to haphazard fragmentation. A time limit is imposed, a kind of guillotine, which will certainly prevent the full, fair and reasonable discussion of the great complicated issues that are involved. These 14 months will not be used for the melting of hearts and the union of Muslims and Hindus all over India. They will be used in preparation for civil war, and they will be marked continually by disorders and disturbances such as are now going on in the great city of Lahore. Attlee, in a tepid attempt at rebuttal, admitted that there is gross inequality of wealth in India, but unfortunately, that social and economic system was continued during all the time of our rule. We did not go in for the revolutionary business of turning out the landlords who do nothing whatever. We did something to repress the money lenders, but not much. We accepted that social and economic system. Why are we told now, at the very end of our rule, that we must clear tip all these things before we go? Otherwise, we shall betray our trust. If that trust is there, it ought to have been fulfilled long ago. The House of Commons divided late that night in March, strictly along party lines, with a majority of 337 Labourites closing ranks behind their Prime Minister and 185 Conservatives walking the other way with Churchill. Mountbatten, with his brilliant staff of experts, were soon to be launched on the fastest mission of major political surgery ever performed by one nation on the pregnant body politic of another. Communal rioting in Multan left 20 dead and many more injured, as Jenkins took direct control of his Punjab province under Section 93 of the Fast Fading Act of 1935. The Nawab of Mamdot worked frantically to put a Muslim League ministry together, but could win the support only of several scheduled caste and Indian Christian members of his assembly, as well as 3 non-League Muslims to add to his bloc of 80 party stalwarts. This left the solid Hindu-Sikh opposition almost equally balanced against him. Meanwhile, in New Delhi's interim cabinet, finance member Liaquat Ali accepted official advice and presented a tax-heavy budget designed to squeeze Indian industrial and commercial capitalists heavily enough to meet skyrocketing deficits caused by abandoning the salt tax and by paying retiring service pensions in unprecedented numbers. Wavell noted to Pethick Lawrence, "The budget is a clever one in that it drives a wedge between Congress and their rich merchant supporters like Birla." "Amritsar was my main anxiety yesterday," Jenkins wrote Wavell on March 7th. "By the evening, the city was completely out of control. The death roll does not seem to be very high, but the figures we have are only for the corpses which have passed through the hospital mortuary. Most of the population seem to have produced arms. Many buildings are burning. Masses of people running away from the city added to the confusion and looting. Police reinforcements were dispatched by midnight and 2 British battalions. Bad rioting is reported from Rawalpindi with 25 dead and perhaps 100 injured. Rioting has continued in Sialkot and Jalandhar. These affairs always go through 3 stages: frenzy, funk, recrimination. The frenzy was to continue all year. The Congress Working Committee met in emergency session on March 8th and resolved that the transfer of power, in order to be smooth, should be preceded by the recognition in practice of the interim government as a dominion government with effective control over the services and administration. The central government must necessarily function as a cabinet with full authority and responsibility. Any other arrangement is incompatible with good government and is peculiarly dangerous. In this hour, when final decisions have to be taken, the Working Committee earnestly call upon all parties and groups to discard violent and coercive methods and cooperate peacefully. The end of an era is at hand and a new age will soon begin. Let this dawn of the new age be ushered in bravely, leaving hates and discords in the dead past. When forwarding these Congress resolutions to the Viceroy the next day, Nehru explained our intention to urge the Muslim League to join Congress in the Assembly and to work together amicably toward reaching a final settlement. He added with an almost audible sigh of resignation, if unfortunately this is not possible, we have also suggested the division of Punjab into two parts. This principle would, of course, apply to Bengal also. Not pleasant for us to contemplate, but such a course is preferable to an attempt by either party to impose its will upon the other. Recent events in Punjab have demonstrated that it is not possible to coerce the non Muslim minority in the province, just as it is not possible or desirable to coerce the other. In the event of the Muslim League not accepting the cabinet delegation scheme and not coming into the Constituent Assembly, the division of Bengal and Punjab becomes inevitable. Congress was now ready to concede Pakistan, including only Muslim majority districts, but Pakistan nonetheless. It was early March of 1947. Jinnah had won. We have got to stand on our own legs. Quaid-e-Azam told Muslim journalists in Bombay on March 12th, insisting that our ideology, our goal, our basic and fundamental principles are not only different from the Hindu organizations but are in conflict. There is no common ground of cooperation. There was a time when the idea of Pakistan was laughed at. But let me tell you this, there is no other solution which will do credit and bring honor to our people. Inshallah, God willing, we shall have Pakistan. Communal tension, Jenkins reported, was acute in almost all districts of Punjab, with the major cities Lahore, Amritsar, Multan, and Rawalpindi key danger points. But the trouble was spreading to the villages, fanning out across the once prosperous countryside like cancerous cells of fanatical hatred. Cut loose and growing at so alarming a rate, there seemed to be no control possible, no inhibiting force available to stop them. In Amritsar, Master Tara Singh was reported to have told his Sikh followers that the civil war had already begun. Sikh defense member Baldev Singh wrote Wavell, I make no secret of my conviction that Muslim League's onslaught on the coalition ministry had been engineered in a way. It was because the League had despaired of being able to defeat it by constitutional methods. There were as yet no firm casualty figures for the Punjab, but Jenkins estimated that about 1,000 persons had been killed in the last month of rioting and many multiples of that figure wounded. The rains would be late that year, but the Punjab's fields were to be flooded with blood. Mountbatten met almost daily with the cabinet in London, seeking answers to thorny problems from those who had grown old, failing to solve them. His youth was his armor. His innocence of Indian politics garbed him in hope. He thought, as he informed the cabinet in early March, that the Indian leaders themselves would sooner or later realize that the retention of the Indian army under central control was vital both to the external security of India and to the maintenance of internal law and order. He planned to warn the interim government that he would not allow them to use British bayonets to keep law and order, but only to protect British lives. That evening, they met at 10 Downing Street. The Viceroy designate needed flying orders, and there were still many amendments to be considered. Nehru's old friend, roving ambassador V.K. Krishna Menon, also met with Mountbatten that March 13th, briefing him on the current situation in India and Congress's suggested solutions. On the question of Muslim League demands, Krishna Menon proposed two Pakistans, one in the northwest partitioning the Punjab as well as Sindh and the other in northeast, to include the districts of eastern Bengal which are predominantly Muslim and certain areas of Assam, thus partitioning Bengal. I believe that partition is the price that will have to be paid for any stability in Bengal. Any solution which bands over Calcutta to Pakistan will be unstable and impractical. On the other hand, the League has to be given a port on the east, and the solution is that, as part of the compromise settlement, India should build a large sized city and port in Chittagong. That is, provide the money for it, however many millions it may cost. Calcutta financial interests thus were prepared to pay for retention of their capital, and this formula was ultimately accepted by all parties. Tens and thousands of refugees began pouring into Rawalpindi from ravaged villages in the countryside. Attacks on non Muslims have been organized with extreme savagery, Jenkins wired on March 17th. Deputy Commissioner Rawalpindi believes that in his district alone there may be 5,000 casualties. As information flowed in from outlying regions of Punjab, a pattern of organization and conspiracy seemed to emerge, wrote the governor. In parts of Rawalpindi, outbreaks have occurred almost simultaneously, carefully planned and carried out. All Muslims in the affected districts seem to be involved in or sympathetic to the movement. The commander, 7th Division, told me when I saw him yesterday that attacks on non Muslims have been led in some cases by retired army officers, some of them pensioners. The Muslim section of the local notables to whom I spoke were extremely sulky. Non Muslims are vehemently bitter against the civil services and particularly against the police. The League's sword arm was being wielded now with a vengeance. On March 18th, Mountbatten received his pre-departure orders from the Prime Minister. My colleagues of the Cabinet Mission and I have discussed with you the general lines of your approach to the problems which will confront you in India. It will, I think, be useful to you to have on record the salient points. It is the definite objective of His Majesty's government to obtain a unitary government for British India and the Indian states, if possible within the British Commonwealth, through the medium of a constituent assembly. And you should do the utmost in your power to persuade all parties to work together to this end. If by October 1st you considered that there is no prospect of reaching a settlement on the basis of a unitary government, you should report to His Majesty's government on the steps which you consider should be taken for the handing over of power on the due date. You will do your best to persuade the rulers of any Indian states in which political progress has been slow to progress rapidly. It is essential that there should be to the fullest cooperation with the Indian leaders in all steps that are taken as to the withdrawal of British power so that the process may go forward as smoothly as possible. On March 22nd, 1947, Mountbatten reached New Delhi, where he met with Wavell. There was some discussion of the failure of the Indian politicians to appreciate how little time there was to arrange the transfer of power before June 1948, and the question was raised whether the partition of Punjab and Bengal could take place inside the Cabinet Mission's plan. Lord Mountbatten said he thought there must be some strong authority to which to hand over in India, and that any solution must be based on the Indian army. Wavell quit New Delhi early the next morning but remained Viceroy till he flew out of Karachi the following day. I went round to Mountbatten's suite and had a discussion with the Viceroy designate. Clad in his underpants and vest, press attaché Alan Campbell Johnson recalled. He showed me this morning's masterpiece on the front page of Dawn. It is a photograph of Ronnie Brockman of Mountbatten's staff and Elizabeth Ward, Lady Mountbatten's private secretary, in which they are, of course, described as Lord and Lady Lewis arriving. The 19th and the last of the British Viceroys was sworn in by Lord Chief Justice Sir Patrick Spens on the morning of March 24, 1947, with a streamlined version of pomp and panoply for New Delhi's royal ceremony-loving audience. Mountbatten delighted his audience by speaking in an easy and pleasant manner for several minutes after his investiture, nodding to Nehru and the Congress ministers seated to his right, and to Liaquat and his League cabinet colleagues on the other side. That afternoon, he got to work, meeting first with Nehru and then with Liaquat. He had already written personally to Gandhi and Jinnah, asking each of them to come to New Delhi at their earliest convenience to meet with him. Jinnah was still recuperating in Bombay.